Our streaming network. This is a brand new edition of the React. Hope you enjoyed that awesome little video cooked up from our video team there to get you excited for the season, which is just days away. The actual NFL season kicking off tomorrow night, and the Browns on Sunday at 4:25. It cannot get here soon enough. Dallas Cowboys. My name is Brad Ward. Thank you guys for tuning in. I see you guys filing into the chat. We appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching over on X, hop on over to youtube.com/Orange and Brown Report. Make sure you hit like and subscribe for us. It just takes a second and helps us out so much. The man next to me, the one and only Pete Smith. You can follow him on X or Twitter @_Pete Smith_. How are we doing this evening, Pete? You're muted.
I'm good. It's weird because it was the ultimate hurry up and wait type situation where we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Now this week is here. It's super busy, which is good. And now we get to finally see football starting tomorrow with, divisional opponent in action. And then we'll eventually get to Sunday with the Browns kicking off at 4, which is great. But yeah, there's a lot to do between now and Sunday.
Lots to do. So breaking down tonight on tonight's episode, you wrote an interesting article today, Pete, about and I've been listening to you mentioned this in a meeting we had the other day, and I have been listening to the same thing on the radio and whatnot. This general feeling that there's some sort of a lack of enthusiasm around the team. You think it's lack of enthusiasm or anxiety? What do you think it is?
Well, I mean, I don't doubt that there's some element of this where people are just wanting to get it going and get it started. But I've seen for a team that went 11-6 last year, goes to the playoffs, a lot of expectations this year. They're hoping to compete for the division, positioning themselves as a contender. You would think coming into week 1 of the season that there would be a lot more people sort of fired up to get going. And I don't blame fans for this at all. I think this is a product of some choices the organization has made. Some of this, a lot of it revolves around who's at quarterback and what Deshaun Watson has not done to this point. But I do think that the team has just sort of stiff-armed the fan base to a certain point in terms of access. I think the Greenbrier is fine. I think the team feels it's productive, so most people are okay with that. But when you come back from the Greenbrier and then you announce that there are 6 open training camp days, that's ridiculous to me. Beyond the it reduces the amount people have to talk about. It makes the team feel sort of distant in some ways. And the Browns do a lot of their own media, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But it still feels far away. If the Browns were in, Jimmy Haslam's home state, or they were in China, you could still get those videos and see all that stuff. But without being able to sort of touch out and reach out and touch these people, I think there's something missing with that. And you compare that to a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I know this because I've had conversations with Steelers fans who looked at me like I had 3 heads when I noted the fact that Browns have 6 open training camp days, because they're at St. Vincent College and every practice is basically open unless there's weather or something else that's going to change that fact. And that does have a lot of, memories for people. Just having written this and sort of hearing about from people, there are a lot of people who cite either going to Lakeland College or Hiram College when the Browns had training camp there, and those being foundational memories for them, going as kids or being, that type of stuff. And now as adults, they want to take their kids to these things, whatever. But I think a lot of people are looking at this from the standpoint of being adult fans. They don't remember sort of that you have kids who this is a big deal to go see these players that like sort of builds this bond, because like more and more you have a league where it's very easy to get attached to players and potentially more difficult to get attached to a team. And those are the type of things where you build those memories and you sort of have those bonds. If your dad took you to training camp, that's like a big deal for you.
Yeah.
And just being able to take, stand next to a giant lineman or get a selfie or an autograph or whatever. The other part is like, yeah, like there are a lot of people who are, and I state this, like the Browns are going to have a sellout crowd. People are going to be tailgating. They're going to be psyched and ready to go and all this other stuff. But like there are people are sort of, and I got a lot of this from people today who are like, yeah, I sort of feel like, there's something missing there that beyond sort of the obvious things you can pick at. But the other part is like ticket prices go up every year. And if they get the dome they want, which is sort of where I threw this in there, is like, if you're trying to get these people to support you to build the dome, you might want to, have as much goodwill as possible.
It's a great point. Yeah.
If they build the dome, those prices are going to be higher, and there are going to be more people who are priced out of this. So these training camp practices, these type of events are like they're the access point for a lot of people to get to interact with their team, and they're not unhappy with the fact that they're going to watch the game on TV or whatever. But like this is their big moment to get to do these things. And even the Browns have been saying like part of the reason they want to do this whole thing is they want to make it so like more fans can go to these other things. Okay, but like you could have practice in the stadium. They used to do this before the pandemic. They used to have like open up Cleveland Browns Stadium, right? They went to Columbus at one point and just let people in and interact and like do the whole thing. And it doesn't cost anything, or it's extremely cheap. And it's just an experience where you get to see your team live and build these things. And I think contrasting to the Steelers, I think the Steelers right now are doing a better job than the Browns are in terms of getting people going. But like without that, I do think it not only are, potentially kids less enthused because they're not talking to their buddies about, hey, I got to go do this. But I do think the conversations between adults are short because I know, because I have them, and they basically come up and they say like, how do you think the Browns are going to do it? And I'll be like, they look pretty good. And it's like, what do you think about Deshaun Watson? And that's sort of the end of it. Yeah. I think like, let's say Deshaun Watson is mediocre again, and he's going to be mediocre. Like there have been years where people have been hyped about this team when they were awful. They were going to be bad, and you knew it, and people are still psyched. And like the defense alone should have people psyched. The other part, and I didn't mention this in the article, but I do think it's true. The Browns have a lot of fantastic ambassadors for this team right now. Myles Garrett, David Njoku. I know Nick Chubb is, still recovering, but he's a guy that like people love these guys. And every time like you have interaction, like David Njoku is like he's great with kids. He's got a lot of personality and all these other things. There's a lot of players who like have these experiences with fans, and the fans are like, it builds that bond with them that they like want them to succeed more. So I just think it's absolutely nothing to do with the fans. I just think the team itself is missing out on this opportunity to sort of keep building the bond that is, Cleveland, that is a very, and as much as all these teams want to be national brands and international brands, and the Cleveland Browns are certainly in that group, there is a very local feel to the Cleveland Browns. There always has been. It's the fans who kept the colors and the name and all these other things. It's always felt a very localized team, as opposed to, say, Dallas. Dallas coming into this game, their training camp, some of it is in Oxnard, California. They are branding themselves as America's team and all this stuff. Cleveland is Cleveland. Like that part of the pride, and they always want to sell blue collar and all this stuff. Like that's all well and good, but I think you have to make the effort to get these people, access to be able to interact with this team to keep building it, because the NFL as a league wants to be a 12-month-a-year league. They want to get to a point where there's no time you are not getting something from football. And I think the Browns, if they continue down this road, are going to get to a point where it becomes a 9 or 8 month league, where basically from May to September, people are sort of going to tune out and do other things, which it's not the end of the world. Certainly wouldn't be great for us, But I think there is an element of this where like that becomes the missed opportunity if you don't have the access of training camp. You don't have the access to these other things where you can sort of interact and feel like you have a sense of the team. Because like one of the things we keep getting from people, part of the reason people were annoyed, in my opinion, that like the starters weren't out there for training camp or for preseason games because they have no reference point. Like if they saw these guys in practice, particularly Deshaun Watson, they saw these guys in practice consistently and felt like, hey, he's doing really well. We bet, I'm hearing from my buddy, or I went and I saw this or whatever. And being able to sort of cross-check what you saw versus what you're hopefully the OBR, but whatever media site you reference to sort of compare notes. I think that would reduce some of the urgency to feel like, man, we really feel like we want to get them out in preseason because we just haven't seen them. So to me, I again, has nothing to do with fans. I just think the organization is missing an opportunity to continue to build that relationship, continue to sort of endear themselves as they try to make a massive ask from potentially the county for $1 billion plus, that they are not doing themselves any favors and potentially pushing out a certain element of the fan base that is either never going to be able to go to those games because they're expensive or they just don't feel like they have the connection that they used to.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is very well said, but yeah, I think a lot of it is people just not knowing, to your point, not having any reference point to what this team is going to look like offensively. And with Watson, and they're just kind of like, we'll wait and see on Sunday, right? So
yeah, like give me an example. No one has any idea what Jerry Jeudy's going to do. None,
right?
Because you can't go see him. Like, these are the things where it makes it you add mystery to this team, and there's this sense, there's this numbness to the fan base that just doesn't have a sense of the team. And like I said, I think you're doing yourself a disservice with a team that outside of the obvious one, which is not the most warm and fuzzy guy because of everything he's been accused of. But there are a lot of players on this team that like genuinely make people feel good about who they are and give them experiences that carry them through, that make them want to stick with this team, that make them want to not just take sort of a fantasy football approach to the NFL.
Yeah, proud to be a Browns fan, for sure. All right, good stuff, Pete. Well covered there. And if you haven't read it, go read that and everything else over at theobr.com, as we've got you covered leading up to this huge game on Sunday. And it is a massive game. And we're going to start with a national approach and look at this from Get Up with a little Andrew Hawkins doing his media thing here. I want to time it properly. This video gets a little weird for copyright reasons at the beginning, but hang with us here. As I prepare it. Okay. And here we go. First video of the night, Get Up this morning. Andrew Hawkins, or yesterday morning, or this morning, I'm not sure. Yeah, actually, talking Browns Cowboys.
Honestly, Greeny, it won't mean anything. The same way if he loses, it won't mean anything, because what we're judging Lamar Jackson on is his ability to win in the postseason.
Dallas. Yes, listen, I think this defense at the end of the season is going to be a top 3 defense. I think Schwartz does a fantastic job. I think they got pass rushers galore. I think they can play on the back end. They can play man. They can be physical with teams. I know they got some injuries they're trying to overcome on the back end, but listen, this is a team built to rush the passer. That's a problem for Dallas.
Absolutely. So speaking of the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy getting his team ready after an offseason filled with one tumultuous day after another, but he's got a master plan for week 1 and well beyond. Here's what he said.
It's not hard to focus on Cleveland. I mean, it's what's right in front of us. You have to have a plan. My plan's for 21 games. We have a 21-game plan. Laid it out today in the team meeting.
So everyone, of course.
Hold on. That's like the polar opposite of Stefanski, who has never said anything but 1 week at a time. And here's Mike McCarthy laying out his 21 game plan. Interesting. No?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Browns have a formula they really like.
Yes.
I think McCarthy sort of has to, by virtue of the fact that everybody's constantly trying to fire him.
Yes. Yeah. 21 game plan. All right. Here we go.
Of course, jumps on that and seizes on it, because, I mean, what's he supposed to say? I've got an 18-game plan.
Right.
We always lose in the first round. Right? So, right. I mean, what's he supposed to say? Right. And there's nothing wrong with him saying that.
I thought he's not shooting high enough because if you get the 1 seed,
that's right.
Pointed out, they can't.
They can't because it hasn't happened in 20 years.
You can't win the division.
Has told me for 10 years since I've been working with him, it's not going to happen, sir. And he's always right. McCarthy's just doing Graz math.
He knows the rules.
Go to 21. We're not going to win the division, but we're going to be in the hunt.
Okay, so let's make sure everyone is as ready for this weekend as they need to be. Because Graziano, who was out there on his training camp tour, you're already in mid-season form. Most of us are just getting caught up with everything. So we look at the Browns and we say this is a team that finished so strong last year, made the playoffs with Joe Flacco. That defense is elite. There are some questions about Cleveland in week 1.
Mainly health, right? I mean, they haven't, both tackles have had a hard time getting on the field this offseason. It looks like Jack Conklin might be able to play, but he may have to play left tackle because Jedrick Wills is hurt. Right. So, and the defense, they got some guys working their way back from injury too. I think the Browns are going to have a very good team this year. A lot depends obviously on the quarterback, Deshaun Watson, and how he plays, but they may not be all the way whole just yet for a game against Micah Parsons and the Cowboys.
That's something to keep your eye on as we get set for Sunday and what's going to be a big spotlight game, right? Tom Brady's first game as an announcer and everything else. And then there is the question
of Brady announcing. I forget Love Greeny. That's where we're at right now.
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
It's a pretty big deal.
But it is a big deal. But let's talk about the game. Let's talk about the game.
I'm happy to talk about the game.
I appreciate that.
I think Brady's presence in the booth will be a major factor, don't you?
I'm tuning in, no doubt.
Look, this whole offseason, all the talk, all the nonsense, all the craziness and everything else, that's all behind us now. Let's go on the field. CeeDee Lamb has been in camp for, 6 days? He's going to have a total of less than 2 weeks. So for the Cowboys' chances of winning, for the folks who have fantasy implications and may have, prop bet implications, what percentage of CeeDee Lamb's best should we be expecting on the field Sunday in Cleveland?
I would say 85 at most, and that does not dictate his ability. He's still CeeDee Lamb, but he has not been in camp running the 10 miles of full speed routes that a receiver needs to get ready for a season. We talk about football shape all the time, and the only way to get in football shape is to play football. Yeah, that's true. There's a higher level than that. There is getting in wide receiver shape in the NFL, and it is even harder than getting in NFL shape because these are the guys that sprint and run the most. There's going to be a lot of wear and tear he's about to put on his body, and if his body isn't prepared for it, you got to be prepared for him not to be at the full speed, full strength for the duration that you typically see him. And he's the linchpin in this offense. So without him being able to be that, there's absolutely a degrade that you're going to see from the Dallas Cowboys offense against a really good Browns defense.
I'm going to say something that is probably going to make everyone yell at me, but I'm right. And that is that, look, it's going to feel like an enormous game, right? Because Tom Brady's in the booth and everything else.
Yes.
But the reality is it's a road game against an AFC opponent.
Right.
This game will not decide the Cowboys season. It is not worth having CeeDee Lamb getting the hamstring injury that all these guys get. So I'm not suggesting don't play him. Don't be ridiculous.
Right.
But I'm saying caution is the proper route here, right? Discretion, the better part of valor, whatever expression I'm looking for. I'm not putting him in a position, even if it means, jeopardizing my chances of winning the game. I am limiting his snaps or whatever it is you have to do to keep him from getting hurt because we got a long season and we cannot have our most important player pulling a hamstring week.
No, I actually agree with you.
All right. So I didn't even think about this, Pete. I didn't. They said pitch count, but they were talking about practice when they initially talked about a pitch count, right? I didn't think he would be. I expect 100% CeeDee Lamb, I guess, by week 1. I assumed he'd be staying in shape, and they're talking about game shape, and I get that's different and everything. But to say that he'll only be 85% of himself, which is still better than most. I guess I didn't. I was expecting, full go CeeDee Lamb. Am I wrong? Do you agree with them that it'll be somewhat limited?
They're paying him $2 million a game. He better be ready to go. I mean,
That's what
the
I'm
expectations
saying,
are through the roof, and he is the linchpin of that offense. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, the Browns aren't going to turn it down if you want to give him a gift and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna basically give you a game because we don't want to, overuse CeeDee Lamb." Great. I mean, the Browns will take it, but the problem is you're the Dallas Cowboys. You can't really do that. As I just mentioned, Mike McCarthy has an immense amount of pressure, not only because you're the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy's already, always on the hot seat theoretically, but there is a guy out there in the media who is going to be brought up when every single NFC East team loses a game. His name is Bill Belichick. It's just going to be hanging over everything. And I don't know if that's a real credible threat, but you're going to hear it endlessly every time one of these teams loses because everybody's going to convince themselves he can step right in and win a Super Bowl with this roster that's already ready to go. So beyond that, I mean, whether it's the national media or whatever, you got Stephen A. Smith who's just waiting for the Cowboys to lose a game so he can just stomp on them with both feet. It's really difficult because they don't have a whole lot of offensive weapons. Brandon Cooks is fine.
Right.
They've got a decent tight end in Jake Ferguson. Okay. Jalen Tolbert. And their offensive line is like trying to make up for the fact that they don't really have good running backs. Like they are betting all of their rushing game on the idea that the offensive line, which is going to include 2 rookie starters, is going to make up and sort of will a running game into existence. So between the amount that CeeDee Lamb is being paid and everything else, I don't know how you can sort of, play this off and go, well, I mean, we got to sort of ease him in. Like,
Yeah.
I do think that part of it is entirely on the Dallas Cowboys. As always, it never fails. Dallas Cowboys will talk tough and go, we're not going to pay this guy all this money. We're not going to do this, that, and the other thing. They wait forever, bend over, give him all of it, and then put themselves in a bad position. It always happens this way, and they have no one to blame but themselves for this. But here again, the Browns are going to be focusing most of their attention on stopping CeeDee Lamb. And if he's anything less than the full version of himself, or they're forced to take him off the field, that defense is going to be a nightmare for Dak Prescott and whatever the Cowboys are trying to do.
Yeah, agreed. I just assumed, I assumed he would be this entire time he's been working, right? That just was my understanding. So that he would be ready for week 1. I mean, he's a wide receiver. It's a little different, right? I don't know. Maybe not.
I guess the comparison I would sort of make to this is like when Deshaun Watson wasn't like back, whatever you think you're doing to get in shape, it's always just a little bit different, or whatever you're doing to get prepared, it's always a little bit weirder. Now, maybe CeeDee Lamb has had the perfect formula for this. I don't know the answer to that, but to Hawkins' point, I do think there's a little bit of a weirdness where people are like, man, I've been doing all this stuff to get in shape. And then you get on the football field and it just is always a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's continue on here. You mentioned the running game. Do you think it'll be, out of all the guys, I kind of think it'll be Dowdle that gets the ball the most touches. Do you disagree?
I have no idea how they're going to try to mix this thing up. Obviously, they just got Dalvin Cook in like 20 minutes ago. They've got Zeke Elliott. Rico Dowdle would make a lot of sense if he's just willing to sort of get what the offensive line can give him and not, one, make mistakes. Like, he fumbles the ball, that's death. But 2, if he can just consistently get what's there. But the problem you're going to run into, and this is going to be a challenge for the Browns, is Dalvin Tomlinson fully ready to go? Like, how many snaps is he going to be able to play? To the opposite end of the CeeDee Lamb conversation, Dalvin Cook coming off the knee scope, is he ready for a full load of snaps? Because he's the anchor of that defensive line.
I can't imagine.
Shelby Harris, obviously a very capable run defender. Maybe they activate Juwan Briggs to get an extra body, But then you're down to the Maurice Hursts and Quentin Jeffersons, who Maurice Hurst can occasionally make plays against the run, but that's not really what he is. And Quentin Jefferson is a god-awful run defender. So that is sort of the challenge. If they can control the line of scrimmage and force the Cowboys into being an obvious, into a lot of obvious passing situations, it really unlocks everything the Browns want to do defensively. And that's where they're going to have a really big problem. And that's where I think Dallas could find themselves in a lot of trouble if the running game's just not there and everything is on Dak to try to make it work, because that's been a challenge for him. He doesn't generally respond well to pressure, as all quarterbacks are sort of impacted by pressure. But when you've got Myles Garrett against a rookie, you've got Zadarius Smith against Terrence Steele, Terrence Steele is a very talented offensive lineman.
Yeah.
He's sort of in a spot similar to where the Browns tackles are, where he was down last year due to injuries and stuff, and they need him to come back in a big way. You've also got Cooper Beebe as a rookie who's never played center in a real game, is going to be playing his first NFL start there. They've got phenomenal guards, but if you can just allow Jim Schwartz to pin his ears back and stunt and do all these other things, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah. You mentioned Tomlinson. I can't imagine he could play a full load, or even, I was thinking, like, I don't even know how many snaps to expect, but like, I can't imagine a ton, right?
Hard to say. I mean, like, usually he's around, I think, 60%. I mean, even if it's 50, again, if they can do their job and do it well, then they can sub-package and get him out a lot.
Just
but the problem you run into is if the Cowboys are able to stay on schedule, then there are more reps where you're going to need those bigger bodies potentially, or you're trying to make something happen with smaller, quicker guys, which is, a challenge, especially against a quality interior group. Zach Martin and Tyler Smith are very good. And, I don't know what we're going to see from Cooper Beebe, but he's a big, strong kid. So if those guys can get a push against smaller guys, then that could be a vulnerability for the Browns.
For sure.
I think you have to manage reps and expectations for CeeDee Lamb for week one, right? Because as a player, you want to get out there. You want to do all you can do for your team. All that matters. Everybody's excited. Here's the problem, and Hawk says it best, and he's done it so he knows. It's not only the mileage on your body. It's the defense, the way they play you. Cleveland's going to play them physically. They're going to get up and jam. They're going to make it. It's going to be contentious off the line, a lot of hand fighting. When you got to go run block, you got to get down inside. There's a lot that goes into that, and I think people don't understand. Like getting, piles, making sure you don't get, rolled up on all the things that go in that people don't ever discuss. That's football shape. And I think Hawk made a great point, and it's making sure he's prepared for all of that if you're that medical staff and the coaching staff.
That's the training camp ramp-up period that everybody gets now. He has to get that, even though it's a month and a half later, or else, as you mentioned, they're putting him at risk.
I've seen it we've all seen it a million times. That hamstring week one, it is not worth it. All right, we're just getting rolling here.
Me knowing I'm about to break some heart.
All right, so that is get up on CeeDee Lamb. Potentially there, Pete, them talking about him not getting the ramp-up period. I mean, he's got to have been doing this on his own or with a trainer or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy.
Sure. I mean, a lot of it just comes down to, is the timing going to be there between him and Dak? Is there going to be any loss of chemistry? Is there going to be an adjustment? Are they going to be on this off at times? That does matter. I mean, you obviously practice for months, and, some of these guys can pick it up effortlessly, but it becomes an unknown in this. Like, what's the impact going to be? And, for the Browns part, how are they going to play it? I imagine they're going to have at least two defenders paying attention to CeeDee Lamb on basically every play. What's that going to do on top of everything else? So, when you're sort of showing up at this stage and trying to ramp up and go, there are just a lot of complications that can change that. Because here's the problem for CeeDee Lamb: this is going to be every week, unless Brandon Cooks has a really good season and Jake Ferguson takes another step forward, or Jalen Tolbert becomes a viable option. Like, it's CeeDee Lamb all day long. He's fearless.
Yep.
He will run across the middle. He will take hits. That's the other problem is, he's a guy where he plays a violent style of football with his body. Yeah. Is that going to come up and be a problem without knowing his training and all this other stuff? Maybe he's done a great job to anticipate all of these sort of hurdles, and he's going to come out and play great. But
sure.
They mentioned the hamstring thing, but there's any number of things that could potentially go wrong. It's something that obviously people are going to be watching.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. Thank you guys. You guys are watching the React on the OBR streaming network. A lot of you in here tonight. We appreciate that as always. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And thank you, Teddy, for the kind words about the show. Make sure you tell a friend. We appreciate it. We're going to go to our second video here. Now, this is, in the off season on this show, we did a lot of Quincy Avery and Deshaun's podcast. This is Quincy Avery on the Maggie and Perloff, I think I'm saying that properly.
Yes.
Podcast. Which
it's a radio. They're just a radio show.
Radio show, sure. He was on to talk about quarterbacks, college football stuff, but the first 6 minutes or so here on Deshaun, some interesting stuff. So we're gonna just take a peek at that. I think I have this timed up properly.
Maggie and Perloff on the Infinity Sports Network.
Back on the Maggie and Perloff show. Great debate today. The best post-Saturday Night Live career. We'll get more into that in a minute, but we are just 8 days away from the NFL season. And when you're previewing the season, Maggie, I think you really have to start with the quarterbacks. And there's nobody who is better to talk to quarterbacks about. If you want to sit next to somebody at a bar and ask them about quarterbacks, there's no one better in the world than Quincy Avery, of course, the foremost quarterback trainer in the nation, in my opinion. Quarterback Takeover, works with several pros, college guys, youth football, everybody. I think a quarterback genius. Quincy, how you doing, buddy?
What up? I'm amazing. How are you today?
We are great. So we have to start with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. I got to tell you, I'm gonna call Maggie out right now. She is flirting with, and I don't know where she is. She has high expectations for the Cleveland Browns, but we get so much different news about where Deshaun Watson is health-wise and where the team is offensively. So how's Deshaun doing? What do you expect this season?
I expect really good things, right? Like, I think the expectation for him needs to be greatness. I think that, and I understand how people view him, whatever that looks like, but they're absent the fact that he's been really, really injured really injured last year, right? His shoulder was broken, right? There was ligament, like all these things were issues with his shoulder, and he still played pretty well. Like that Ravens game, you go back, his shoulders dislocated, high ankle sprain. Like, he did good things at the quarterback position despite being really injured. There was a game against the Colts last year where he couldn't throw the ball 25 yards, and he went out there and still tried to play. So I think that this has been his best offseason in a really long time in terms of preparation for the game, being able to throw, putting himself in position where he was able to do all the things throwing-wise that he needs to do to be successful in an NFL game, and he's in a good spot. And then I also think, like, we see things like, oh, Deshaun Watson didn't practice or didn't play in this last preseason game. Well, I think that it probably would have been irresponsible on the Browns' part to put him out there with the situation they had at the offensive line. Like, it's a situation that I think Andrew Berry does as good a job as anybody. He's like figuring it out and getting that situation in a spot that they'll be good in. But coming off an injured shoulder, you don't want to put somebody out there in that situation. And then I think that every day that he misses, like, isn't throwing, and I think that was only one day during practice, it's all very, very calculated in terms of what they're doing when they're doing it. So the Cleveland Browns have a really good plan, and I think Ken Dorsey is going to be an amazing addition to the things that Deshaun Watson is able to do at the quarterback position.
Quincy Avery is joining us, works very closely with Deshaun Watson, but is one of the quarterback guru coaches out there. And we're happy to have him on the show today. So a couple questions off of that with Deshaun. Quincy, do you think his shoulder is ever going to be back to 100%? Or is this going to be something he's going to have to play through pain, play through soreness, and we're never going to get the fully healthy Deshaun shoulder again?
Oh, I think in terms of throwing, like, I mean, we've tested, so it's not, hey, is it as good, right? He throws the ball as hard with more velocity. Like his miles per hour are higher now than they were prior to the injury. So those things are not like a concern.
Okay.
Right. It's just his arm getting in a position where he's thrown enough, right? He's built up that callus from putting enough throws on his arm that after taking like almost a year off of throwing, that he's going to be able to have like the ability to go out there and throw every single day.
Okay. Then another question I have for you. So he's throwing with more velocity than ever, but it's just about building up maybe the tolerance and
All right, I gotta. What do you think about that comment that he's throwing with more velocity than before he was injured? Just kind of a weird. I don't know if I would have said it that way if I was Quincy, but thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, from his standpoint, he better be right. But we've seen this. I mean, Drew Brees. There was a concern at one point that his career was going to be over. Nick Saban famously blames him, that the doctors of the Miami Dolphins for the reason he ultimately ended up back in college. And he went from having a pretty average arm to a very strong arm. I think there is something to the idea, like when you hear a player talk about, I just generally want to try to improve. There's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that there's something to be said for when a guy has a specific mission in mind. And you don't want it to necessarily be for an injury, but Deshaun did not have like a muscle or a tendon or something. It was a bone. And bones, heal and all that. And then it just becomes building up the strength and all that other stuff. I think being on that mission has allowed him, and this was a comment that a lot of people made when they saw him in press conferences and stuff. He looked noticeably bigger up top. That if he has done those things, there's every possibility that he's done more to improve his overall strength of the arm. Now, part of that is also like, where does velocity really come from? Yeah, the shoulder's part of that. But your core and your hips and the ability to generate that torque is ultimately where a lot of that strength is going to come from. But yeah, I do believe that could happen. Now, again, I would just say that he has to be sure about that. But if he's right, then that becomes valuable, especially because one of the concerns that was initially raised when the Browns were going to acquire Deshaun Watson was he had been a quarterback who had either thrived in the South or domes and had, games throughout his career where he did not play particularly well in weather and wind.
Yeah.
And this may sort of harden him a little bit in that regard. And, the other part about this is and we saw this last year, even in that Ravens game where he played well, where his throwing mechanics were so disjointed because of the things he was working through. He looked like a guy a pitcher pushing off rubber and extending his body so much from his legs that his arm was behind everything. And you look at what he's been doing now, and it looks way more, it looks more succinct. It looks more compact. It looks easier on his arm. It looks more comfortable. He's able to sort of get that tight motion going, and he just looks better. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to believe in what, obviously Quincy Avery is going to, be there for his guy, but I do think there's evidence to support what he is saying.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. I do think he looks more balanced and like he has a better base when he throws the ball, to your point, from the little we've seen from camp and stuff. So that's interesting about the velocity, though. Not necessarily like a Henry Rowan Gardner thing, but a more like got his form back or in a better place.
and all of that to keep throwing. So this was kind of interesting. The Athletic does this thing every year where they do quarterback tiers, and Mike Sando, what's that? You saw it.
Mike Sando. Yeah, I love that piece.
It's a great piece. So Deshaun's in tier 4 this year and dropped another tier. And one of the executives had this to say in the article. He said, it's a bad fit in Cleveland because you have an RPO quarterback, a run pass option quarterback, in a play action offense. It's not a good mix. Do you agree with that? Are they running the right offense for Deshaun Watson in Cleveland?
I think that so these executives are all over the place. Deshaun might have run 3 RPOs a game when he was in Houston, right? Their offense was not predicated on the RPO. Now, one of the plays that they ran really well at a high level where they got that tight end in the flat and they had Deshaun on the move off the run action and he'd be, it looked like a boot. That is something that they brought with them to Cleveland, right? So it's not like they're trying to reinvent the wheel. I think that Kevin Stefanski was probably one of the best play callers in terms of back to the defense, play action passes. But I think that he's been able to blend that with the things that Deshaun does really well. And maybe it won't be so much back to the defense, but shotgun play action passes. And I think that that's going to put him in position. Now, the interesting part for them is the use of 11 personnel, which is 1 tight end, 1 back, and 3 receivers, versus the use of 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends, which Stefanski's done a great job of throughout his career. But you could see that with just the roster, right? Who did they keep? They only kept 2 tight ends. So I think that they have a really good idea of what they're doing. And I think that they're going to be able to set up a situation that Deshaun's able to be special.
We're talking to quarterback trainer Quincy Avery. And right behind you, Quincy, if you're watching on Infinity Sports Radio YouTube channel, you have framed jerseys. And the one, you got Deshaun Watson, Jalen Hurts, a lot of the quarterbacks you've worked with. The one in the middle is my favorite. It is a Josh Dobbs jersey, who is the first NFL quarterback you worked with way back. And now it's kind of getting back in the day when you and Josh Dobbs hooked up in high school. He's in San Francisco. Talk about fit, because Josh Dobbs has played on so many teams now. He's in that.
All right. We don't need to hear more about Josh Dobbs, but the interesting stuff from Quincy there, Pete, and a very good explanation, I thought, of what, seems like a poor take by somebody or somebody not paying attention, whoever, mentioned that about the bad fit, because they're certainly changing a lot this offseason.
Well, some of that just comes down to, people who talk to writers and stuff in those type of pieces. They want to put guys into boxes.
Yeah.
And clearly they want to put Deshaun Watson in this particular box. And that's fine. I mean, he's ultimately got to prove that he's successful in Cleveland. But to Quincy's point, like, they brought a lot of stuff from Houston. Deshaun Watson was heavily involved in the offense that they've been putting together for this offseason between him, Stefanski, and Ken Dorsey, and some of these other coaches. Like, he had agency in those discussions. So, like, and Kevin Stefanski has talked about this at numerous points last year, or just previous years in general. Like, if he comes to the quarterback with a game plan and the quarterback says, I don't want to run this, they don't run it. Like, you're getting plays that the quarterback is signed off on and saying, I feel good about running this. So this notion, and maybe there's some element where, like, a quarterback is sort of not honest with himself and he's like saying, I like this, I think we should run it. Maybe he's not good at it, but ultimately, like, they all have the same goal. So it doesn't make any sense for them to sort of do things that don't, sort of jive with what each guy wants to do. Now, I would always argue that it's worth the coaching staff putting, Deshaun Watson in some situations he's not necessarily comfortable with, to see, one, if he gets more comfortable and likes what they do, that he can sort of add that to his repertoire, or just give him a different perspective. Like, he's talking about turning his back to the defense on play action. There's a lot of quarterbacks who do not like to do that. They want to always have their eyes on the read, particularly because, with the amount of teams that run disguised coverages, you've turned your back. And then by the time you get there, you may be looking at a completely different picture than you started. So there's some quarterbacks who don't like that. But just because you don't turn your back to the defense doesn't mean you can't run play action. And ultimately, if you run an RPO and the quarterback pulls it at that point is play action. So to suggest he's an RPO quarterback but not a play action quarterback doesn't make much sense to me. Obviously, the blocking schemes are a little bit different because obviously, play action, you are in pass protection of some sort versus RPO where it's a run blocking scheme and the quarterback's making a decision based on what a defender or a window does or whatever. But I don't necessarily agree with that argument that he can do one, not the other. But we can talk about all the things that I think Deshaun Watson's going to be able to do. And, the things that Ken Dorsey is, theoretically going to put him into, stuff that he likes being able to do, being in more spread out offenses, empty in particular, because he doesn't like a crowded backfield with the way he wants to extend plays, this, that, and the other. But whether they run the exact offense that the Texans are running or not, ultimately it's not going to matter. Deshaun Watson's got to go out and play good football.
Yeah.
What Quincy Avery's telling you, they're putting him in the position he wants to be in. So now he's got to go out and execute. So I keep hearing people talk about all these built-in excuses, which I don't subscribe to. They keep bringing up rust. What are we talking about? There is no rust at this point. You got to go out and win. The Browns don't have time for it. And he's been working at this for months and months and months. Just because he hasn't done it in a game you can see, or he hasn't been knocked on his butt in a game, doesn't mean he's not ready to go. It just means that you haven't seen it yet. And it may not be pretty. And I do think, and I've said this all along, I think the more he just plays, the more comfortable he would get. And we've got to get out of that mindset of trying to make the $230 million throw and just make the right plays, get the ball out of your hands, and live to play another down. Those opportunities will be there. But here again, he's just got to go out and prove it.
Yeah. And there's going to be parts of this offense that are still Stefanski staples that he's done now and he's aware of. And there's going to be parts that are different. But, and so I don't know. I'm excited to see what this offense looks like. Some is going to look the same, and I think some is going to look different. But the combination of the two, I think, will provide them with a lot of different answers. At least that's the hope. So,
yeah, you take what worked. You take what worked. Take what you like. Take what gave defenses problems. Get rid of the stuff that didn't, and add in more stuff that you feel good about. This notion that the Browns are making this super dramatic change. This is what everybody should be doing every season. The Browns did it obviously with the coaching staff, and I think for the better. Ultimately, I think the Browns are really happy with who they have. They've been able to add with the coaching staff, and I think that's going to be a benefit to them. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing is every season. I don't care what level of football you're talking about. Get rid of the stuff that didn't work and put in new stuff that's going to give defenses more problems. This is not difficult or complicated to understand.
Yeah, totally agree. Good stuff. All right, you're watching the React. We're going to get to this. Is an interesting video here. I wanted to give you a angle tonight as we are in game week here, and take a second to hit like and subscribe if you have a second here. We appreciate you watching. But this is from the Dallas Cowboys angle. So this is Talking Cowboys on the at Dallas Cowboys.com, I believe. So this is their, I guess, what would be maybe their version of Browns Daily, but in Dallas, I'm assuming. So something to that effect. But them talking about the matchup, mostly. Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll go ahead and play this to give you kind of an angle of how the Dallas folk are feeling about this one.
Offense, and I'm not going to lie to you guys, they don't scare me. They do not scare me. The Browns offensively last year, here's some of their totals. Total yardage, 16th in the league. Scoring, they were tied for 10th, so not too bad. Rushing, 12th. Passing, 19th. They were the 29th ranked team on third down, bottom 5 in the league in terms of third down efficiency, and they allowed the 21st most, what would that be? They were 21st in sacks allowed, so they gave up top, would that be 12? Top 12 amount of sacks in the league last year as an offensive line. So when you look at the offense, I'm not necessarily worried. 28th in yards per play. If I had one thing that I think this Cowboys defense would struggle against, it'd be the run game. Well, they don't have Nick Chubb to hand the football off to. Do you feel like, and that's where I'm headed, do you think Jerome Ford is a capable ball carrier enough to challenge the Cowboys' new look run defense?
Ball carrier is interesting because all purpose, he had 1,100 yards last season and 9 scores. I think we get burnt all the time when it comes to receiving running backs. It gives me PTSD of
Aaron Jones.
Yeah, exactly. But even back to Darren Sproles, you know what I mean? Like anytime there's a shifty running back like that, they kill us. They kill us. So I'm concerned about that. But also, they also brought in Deontay Foreman in the backfield, 6 foot, 235-pound running back from Chicago, who only averaged 4.2 yards per carry last season.
Yeah.
The guy I wanted on the practice squad.
Exactly. Big dude. So I think the easiest fix here is just don't let them get into the red zone. You know what I mean? Like, just don't do it. How's that sound? Easy fix, right?
Yeah, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. You don't have Nick Chubb, so there's a massive drop off there. That being said, as the Dallas Cowboys defense, you don't have the freaking luxury to overlook.
Say it again.
You don't have the luxury to overlook a running back. You don't have the luxury to look at Jerome Ford and say, oh, well, he's not Nick Chubb, or Deontay Foreman and say, oh, well, he's not what he would. You don't have the luxury. You need to go out there and act as if you're playing defense against Nick Chubb, because until further notice, there's a huge question mark slapped right in the middle of your defensive line, and even the linebackers until we see these games, wondering if Mike Zimmer's defense is going to rapidly, both actually, increase the amount, or I should say decrease the production from opposing running defenses. So Jerome Ford, this is a guy, like you said, 1,100 plus all-purpose yards, 9 all-purpose touchdowns, 813 yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns on the ground. So he can be effective. So don't go in there. Don't go into Cleveland thinking, you're not seeing Nick Chubb. So you take a breath. Don't hold that breath and go do your damn job, because these two guys, they can get the job done. And you got to flip that time of possession. You cannot let Cleveland own the time of possession, especially in their stadium. That doesn't bode well when you also have to contend with the receivers.
I call it taking the air out of the football.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't. It's almost like trying to just play keep away. You don't want to let the other team play the game that they love.
Especially the number one offense in the league.
Absolutely, and they're going to do everything they can. They don't care about that. I mentioned 29th in yards per play or 28th in yards per play last year. They could not care less. They will be okay with 2.5 yards, 3 yards, and then they get a first down. 2.5, 3 yards, then they get a second first down.
Right,
and then they keep going down the field.
Time of possession is
marching
another defender.
Exactly.
It's another defender.
And it could play a factor. They do have some weaponry on the outside. I mentioned Amari Cooper. They traded for Jerry Jeudy, which I think is a significant, underrated move this offseason across the AFC in general, not just the Cowboys, or not just the Browns. I like what Elijah Moore can do. Yeah, I mean, weaponry on the outside, running game as a whole, Isaiah, when you look at this team from a film standpoint, and by the way, new offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey is now the OC with Cleveland. Which side of it worries you more, the rushing game or the passing game?
Rushing game.
Yeah.
Still rushing game. I don't.
And is that more for the Cowboys or more for what they're bringing?
Why would you not attack the Cowboys' ability to defend the run?
Until further notice.
Yep.
You want to, as Cleveland, okay, we're now obviously new OC, new year, all that jazz. Historically speaking, when you play the Cleveland Browns, you know that you have to be able to defend against what?
The run.
Yeah.
The run.
Yeah. It was Nick Chubb.
And it ran through Nick Chubb. I think it's, yes, and Nick Chubb is a very talented running back, but I think this game is less about the running back and more about the offensive line. The offensive line of Cleveland, to me, is a solid unit. Those guys work really well together. They move all the time in terms of pulling guards, pulling tackles. I'm going to say this. The Dallas Cowboys feature of the defense is what position? Linebackers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right
That's
now,
their feature. Right now,
It's Mike Zimmer. Yep.
it's featured
That feels good
position.
to say, doesn't it?
Yes, the feature position is linebacker. Okay.
That's a vast difference
Yeah,
than
oh my
January,
God,
right?
feels good. Tastes good. Tastes that.
Well, historically, obviously,
good,
we have to wait and see, right? But historically, the Cleveland Browns have done a lot of counters. A lot of counters. And for those that don't understand, misdirection counters. Okay, that means pulling guards. Right, you're going like you're handing the ball off one way. You let the guard go the opposite direction. You hand the ball off to a running back, going right behind that big man. And if your linebackers are not aggressive and decisive, there will be a 300-plus pound man who loves to put guys into the ground and eat pancakes. He will be on your 230-pound linebacker, 215, 20 with Louis Fowl, right?
Good luck.
In a heartbeat. So these linebackers have to shoot the gaps, trust their eyes, right? So Kendricks, Louis Fowl, all these guys, when you see it, you see a hole, go. The other person in this defense that has to win every single time is the one technique.
Yep.
If the one technique does not control the center, you're in trouble. If you don't win that matchup, you're in trouble. If you get moved to one direction and you allow for him to get his hip turn and get you shifted one direction, you are opening up the Red Sea. And now you're putting so much pressure on your linebackers. But if you can get even a stalemate at that position and don't allow that center to be able to work up to the next level, and when that guard, right guard or left guard decides to vacate their space and that linebacker shoots the hole, you can get these guys down in the backfield. Reason being, if you don't do that, then it's not Chubb in the backfield, but it is a forward in the backfield, and we know that forwards are built for tough.
Darn
and
right.
these guys, these guys, this dude he was clocked at 21 miles per hour last year. So
that's like Isaiah Stanback fast.
No, I'm 22. But if you allow for these guards, again, understand this conceptually. Guard leaves, pulls, gets up to the second level. If your linebackers don't shoot the gap and stop this thing in the backfield, if your one technique doesn't push the guy back or stalemate the center, then all of a sudden he's getting out to the edge. That's running back I'm referring to. And if you have a running back who runs 21 miles per hour and he gets out on the edge, now you're in trouble. Now you're asking Trayvon to come up and make big hits. Now you're asking your defensive backs to come up there and make plays on guys that they really shouldn't have to be worried about.
What you know what that does, then that sets up the play action deep ball. That's what it does, because now your corner has to worry about playing with his eyes.
All right, real quickly. Paul Spencer asking, is this based a little too much on history rather than where the team is right now?
Well, I think the Cowboys guys are very aware of where they have been bad.
Yes. Yeah.
It was weird that they cited a bunch of the overall stats for the Browns last year, given that they had 5 different quarterbacks and lost 3 offensive tackles and this, that, and the other. But I do think it is imperative that the Cowboys try to make the Browns one-dimensional. The problem they run into is their defensive tackle group is not good, and they were scrambling to get more help. Osa Odighizuwa is a lot like Maurice Hurst or Mike Hall in terms of 280 pounds, effective pass rusher, not a great run defender. And then you've got Mozzie Smith, who sucked last year as a rookie. Maybe he's going to be better this year. And then you've got they traded to acquire help from Buffalo in about to be 32-year-old defensive tackle in Jordan Phillips, who was awful last year. They signed Linval Joseph, who's about to be 36 off the couch, who was awful last year. Now, they are all big bodies. They're all about 330, 340, and maybe that's enough to I guess that's Isaiah Stanback's point. It's imperative that Ethan Posick is able to displace whichever nose is there if they want to get success. But if those linebackers are focused on trying to take away the running game, that's great, because then as long as they can keep them honest with it, because then hopefully you're going to have quick passes out to to whether it's the slot or it's David Njoku potentially getting right behind that linebacker level. Whatever, you've got a whole lot of options. As long as you are forcing them to be honest to it, the situation you don't want to be in is 2nd and long, 3rd and long, where now Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence can just focus on getting after the passer. Odighizuwa can get and rush the passer. That's the situation you want to avoid. The Browns, beyond, the focus should be get the ball out of Deshaun Watson's hands as quickly as possible, as often as possible, is to stay on schedule. They mentioned it. They don't need the Browns to get the 4.2 yards per carry, though that would be very helpful. They just need to be able to stay out of those and long situations. Get to 3rd and 5. Get to that negligible area where now they at least have to be thinking about the possibility that the Browns could run the ball to keep them honest. But and I would highly recommend it. Michael Keefe on the Dog House yesterday aired his interview with Bob Sturm, and Bob Sturm talked about the fact that the Cowboys, with the defensive coordinator they had last year, who's now the Commanders head coach, Dan Quinn, that they played practically dime the whole year. And then now with Mike Zimmer, they're going to be a 4-3, and they want to keep linebackers on the field a lot. And if you're the Browns and you're playing, 4 and 5 wide, and one of those wide is David Njoku, this is great for you. By all means, keep those guys in the box or try to have those guys scramble around and cover. That's the perfect situation for you. So if the Browns can keep them honest on the ground, that's going to be a big deal. And to the point, I agree with the notion that the running back is less important than the offensive line. Joe Bitonio obviously battled through injuries all of last year, was not himself, but hopefully fully healthy now. He can return to being Joe Bitonio. And Wyatt Teller in what I think is a scheme that's going to benefit him, that they can get a whole lot of push. And then since Jedrick Wills has all but confirmed that Jack Conklin will be the left tackle
starter,
whatever you're worried about with him as a pass protector, which he's been very good. He's maybe not quite as good as DeJuan Jones was last year, but he's a way better run blocker. That if he can help keep them honest, keep them on schedule, it's going to limit how much those guys can attack. It's going to make his job easier in pass protection. So you get an extra body that can move dudes off the line of scrimmage. And again, get 3-4 yards. Deontay Foreman game hopefully doesn't land on a football. Just charging forward and getting yards. And to their point, Jerome Ford, if he can break a big run at some point in the game, that may put points on the game on the board in a game where points may be at a premium. Both defenses feel good about themselves. Both offenses are sort of having questions in this. So, if this is a game where it's sort of 17-14 or 20-17, somewhere in that neighborhood, a Jerome Ford picking up a big explosive could set up the points that make the difference in this game. So there's a lot to what they're talking about in this matchup. And then obviously the other reason, they want to put the ball in Deshaun Watson's hands. If you are every other team, and we are all sitting here wondering what's Deshaun Watson going to be playing like. Everybody else is sitting there going, we want to put the game in Deshaun Watson's hands. We want to make him prove that he's going to beat us. So if they can really take the line of scrimmage and force the Browns into these long situations, Deshaun Watson's going to have to prove that he can do it. And some of that is proving that he can live to fight another day when it's not there, not hold on to the ball. He's not going to be able to do much to avoid Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. He's not going to be able to extend plays and run all around. He's got to be smart and efficient in terms of either he's got to go and hopefully get to a point where he can slide, get out of bounds, and do those type of things, or he's going to get the ball out of his hands. And those are things that he's not always been comfortable doing, but he's been saying to himself and telling the fan base that these are things he needs to do, to just take the profit, move on to the next play, just be efficient, trust his guys, both his weapons and the defense. And he sort of talked about that in the context of the Ravens game. This is a game where you're hopefully going to see that. So you don't let Micah Parsons take over. So you don't let DeMarcus Lawrence take over. You don't let those guys dictate the game. You allow your weapons to hopefully take advantage of the matchups. Obviously, they're down Deron Bland. That's a big deal. Can they, punish them? And if they're going to keep all these linebackers on the field, can they punish them? That's a huge chunk of this game from the Browns' offensive perspective.
Yes. The 3rd and long with Micah Parsons and Lawrence rushing, Parsons especially, is a recipe kind of for disaster, for the Browns. You just don't want to end up in a ton of 3rd and pass, right? Parsons is gonna, you want to limit his ability to kind of ruin the game, and he will do it if given the opportunity. So the Browns have to have a plan to double team him all the time, especially in those situations that aren't neutral. To your point, where there is no conflict about the run pass, where it is a pass for sure, because he is the guy that will wreck the game, cause a turnover, all those things. And also, you mentioned the injury to Bland. Their right cornerback is a guy named Kalen Carson, rookie, 5th round draft pick. So opposite Diggs they're going to be starting a rookie. Now they have Jordan Lewis in the nickel, but I think they talk about it here, but they do have a 5th round rookie who will be starting at one of their corners.
Yeah, the other thing they brought up that was interesting is Jerome Ford as a receiving back last year. Obviously explosive in that element. Had some drops and some inconsistency, but if he can just be consistent in that element of the game, the Browns, if they can help it, they don't want to put extra help on the offensive lineman. Deshaun Watson doesn't want them to put extra help to double team and all that stuff. Now, chip and release, that type of stuff, great. But if the Cowboys are so focused on all these receivers running down the field, and you can dump a ball off to Jerome Ford or to what we saw in the preseason from Deontay Foreman, and they can create an explosive play or extended drive, that becomes a great opportunity. I think the Browns will likely employ some screens to try to help mitigate some of that pass rush and aggressiveness. And, the backs are helpful, but they obviously love trying to get Njoku on the screen. So those become different ways to sort of try to deal with those challenges. And again, now you're asking those linebackers to do more, which is, potentially going to open up some more opportunities to exploit a weakness. I mean, they think their linebackers are very strong. I don't want to, but just the fact that they are that busy worrying about everything could put them in a situation where they're too conflicted.
Yeah. So the linebackers that they talk about the most, one is a rookie, right? Maurice
Lufau from Notre Dame.
Yes. And then the other one is DeMarvion Overshone from Texas, right?
Second-year guy who missed all of last year with injury, but they really like him. They feel like he's really good. They also like Damone Clark from LSU, who's a really good athlete, who's unfortunately battled some injuries as well. And then, just like the Browns did, the defensive coordinator brought in a guy from his old system, and Eric Kendricks, be the mic and sort of keep everybody lined up and stuff. So they've got guys, but to your point, rookie, second-year guy without a ton of experience, and athletes and this, that, and the other. But if the Browns and the coaching staff can do a good job of putting them in awkward positions or confusing them with some of the stuff they see, that's a great opportunity. And none of the guys that they've mentioned, to me, is equipped to defend a guy like David Njoku. And maybe they're going to use safety help, but I don't know who that guy's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's keep going here.
In the backfield, and that's a recipe for disaster. And Isaiah makes all the great points, and I want to point at something that Maris Leofau told us after Monday's practice that stuck out to me. I asked him specifically, I said, what is Mike Zimmer's message to the rookie linebackers going into their first game? Overshone, and because Overshone is de facto rookie, and Leofau as well. And Leofau's quote was, he told us to just cut it loose and let me do the thinking, end quote. So to Isaiah's point, that if that works out as we hope it does, that is the instinctual play of the linebackers. Just telling them, hey, this is your assignment. Now go play football and don't overthink it. But this is going to be a massive test for Mazi Smith and the rebuilt interior defensive line. So even if the jury is out, and the jury is out on Mazi Smith right now until further notice. But as the jury is out on Mazi Smith, it's going to be a test for Mazi and Linval, the new addition, Linval Joseph. And Osa, we know Osa's going to cook. Osa's going to cook. No question marks on Osa. Thanks. Jordan Phillips. He flashed early in preseason, as early as his first preseason game, with no practice.
32.
Right. So Jordan Phillips, also Diggy Zua,
Flashing
who we
in
know is going to cook,
preseason.
Mozzie,
Great.
and then the newest addition,
Yeah.
Linval Joseph. Those 4 guys up front in those trenches, if they can wall that off, force the runs to the outside, and the linebackers are in fact being cut loose and playing instinctual football, now you're going to force not only Deshaun Watson into abandoning the run. Now you're going to force them, the Cleveland Browns, into playing your game. You want them to drop back 40 times and throw the ball. That's what you want.
Yeah.
They're going to test Kalen Carson. They are. But I tell you what, if you target him 10 times, one of those is going to be an interception.
Yeah.
Right? So you want them getting one-dimensional.
And they haven't been one-dimensional, or at least, let me say it this way. Teams under Ken Dorsey have not been one-dimensional whenever it comes to their quarterbacks. He's had some pretty good success with quarterbacks. I'll tell you about that when we come back on the other side of the break. How can Ken Dorsey, the new offensive coordinator in Cleveland, help grow Deshaun Watson and help push him in the right direction, and how the Cowboys can slow him down? When we come back with more Talking Cowboys right after this.
Doctor, my friend supported me.
To the break. Ken Dorsey, new offensive coordinator for the Browns this season. He was the Bills offensive coordinator from 2022 to 2023. And previous to that, from 2013 to 2017, he was the quarterback coach for Cam Newton in Carolina. Through his time in both of those places, Allen led the NFL with 203 offensive touchdowns since 2019. Newton had over 150 offensive touchdowns in that same span, 2013 to 2017, which was 4th in the NFL. And, of course, he won his MVP award in 2015. So, right now, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, influenced by Ken Dorsey. Back then, an MVP, a top-notch player, coached up by Ken Dorsey. Deshaun Watson was one of the worst quarterbacks in football last year, and it's statistically proven. Since 2022, 41st out of quarterbacks, 41st in completion percentage, 38th in passing yards per game, 36th in passing attempts. His touchdown to interception ratio was 14-9. It was not good.
Oh, brother.
Oh, brother.
This guy stinks. But can Ken Dorsey change that, Isaiah? So from your experience, from a quarterback coach, an OC, whatever it may be, you cannot fix it.
No, not him.
Why is that?
He lost his velocity. Deshaun Watson does no longer, from what I've seen on film, no longer possesses the ability to put any zip on the ball. The interceptions that he had last year were because not only just bad decisions, but the ball wasn't going to get there. Just flat out.
Now, were you saying that before or during his battle with the shoulder issue that eventually landed him out? Do you think that's a remnant of what he was dealing with last year, and maybe it could come back this year?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But from what I've seen, they just not there. You know what I mean? And it might be one of the reasons why Amari Cooper wanted to get out of there.
Why they were talking trade with possible San Francisco.
And when Brandon Ayuk had an opportunity to leave, he was like, not there.
I ain't going.
Right?
He's
So,
like,
I mean,
Pittsburgh.
there's reasons, there's underlying factors as to why guys don't want to go places. And, that seemed to be one as I watched the film. So it's just, I don't think that they're going to be, I think they're going to attempt to put the ball down the field. I think Ken Dorsey's definitely going to try to have the same success that he's had in the past.
I kind of hope they do.
I hope they do
safeties here.
But in order to do that, right? In order to do that, he's going to pay homage to what the Browns have been. He's going to do that, right? Let's hand the ball off. Let's run the rock. That's this is what you guys your identity has been for years. Let's continue to do that. But if Dallas can show some resilience there, it's kind of like the old Kellen Moore. Right? Kellen Moore's like, we'll run the ball. I really don't want to.
He even said it.
Oh, it's not running? Oh, it's not working? Oh,
great.
Just throw the ball 45, 50 times a game.
Fantastic.
And I hope that Mr. Dorsey decides to do that. But Dallas has to make him do that.
Yeah.
So,
all right. There's a lot there that he just said. The idea that lack of velocity on Watson's throws was the reason for, and he said a lot of interceptions. I mean, it wasn't crazy amounts of interceptions, but for interceptions, or what he sees on film is a lack of velocity from his throws. His throws weren't getting there, he said, Pete. Do you find any truth to that?
When he was dealing with the shoulder injury, yeah, there were definitely times where the ball just was not going to get there. Now, there are also some examples where the ball did. I mean, he threaded that ball against the Arizona Cardinals and Mark Cooper down the field. But again, where's the power coming from? That was probably a throw where it was coming from a lot of lower body. Now, this is where we're going to see what's true with what Quincy Avery's talking about in terms of improving his velocity from where he was before. If that's the case, then that would no longer be an issue and potentially allows him to be more successful. But we've got to see it. It's got to play out in the game. And if he can throw with better velocity and they can go down the field and open some of these things up, great. But here's the thing, dating back to the Houston Texans, he never had a whole lot of velocity. Now, that was one of the reasons I was concerned when he made the transition to Cleveland. Again, weather, wind, these things don't help. But if he's done the things that Quincy Avery said he's done in terms of improving his velocity, then that is no longer an issue. Now it just comes down to the decision making. Now it comes down to not trying to make hero plays as often as he was. It comes down to trusting what the offense is doing. Now, the one thing I would push back on is the idea that Ken Dorsey just wants to throw the ball all day. Buffalo, who is he going to hand it off to?
Right.
They've never had a good running back. They've gotten some, out of Dalvin's little brother who's done some okay things, but Josh Allen was your best running back. Cam Newton was oftentimes the best running back. The Browns want to have more things. And certainly Kevin Stefanski has made a lot of his bones on being able to design a very effective run game. And bringing in Dorsey was to sort of spark more ideas in terms of how to improve their drop back passing game and some of the other elements. Obviously, by going with giving the receivers more freedom to sort of, read leverages and those type of things, that's going to be an interesting sort of thing to see. We've seen it a little bit in preseason, but not with Deshaun Watson and those receivers. We've seen it with DTR and some of these other guys. But are we going to get into a situation where, the quarterback thinks he sees one thing and receiver thinks he sees another? Are we going to see miscommunications? And there's more than one potential outcome. You could have two receivers think they're reading something, a certain way and end up bringing a defender into a play that he wouldn't otherwise be in. So there is that element of it. But just in terms of the physical element, what Deshaun Watson is capable of, again, I've seen clips where he looks good throwing the ball down the field. We'll see what happens, what it looks like on Sunday. We'll see if Quincy Avery was right. But, if that's hit the entire basis for why he thinks Watson will fail, we're going to get a pretty quick indicator on that one. And then it becomes, well, if that's not an issue and Deshaun Watson able to just manage the offense, then the Cowboys may have some trouble with a rookie corner, with all these linebackers potentially trying to go out and cover these, what would be receivers and David Njoku and these other things.
Let me ask you this then. I understand he was never a huge velocity guy, right? But he's making the point there that there's no zip, and that's why he threw interceptions. And to your point last year, yes, the shoulder injury at times, maybe that was the case. Just in general, throwing the ball. What about I guess I would push back and say the year before, though, although he wasn't good, I would say that the majority of his mistakes were because of decision making, not because of lack of zip on the ball.
I agree. And it's possible he didn't have enough velocity. And if that is better, then then that is no longer the issue. Now it becomes all about trusting what you see from the defense, reading it correctly, getting the ball out, most importantly, and getting it to taking the profit as opposed to always trying to make the $230 million throw. If he can avoid those things and just avoid turning over the football, the Browns have a great defense. The Browns don't need him to score. Don't get me wrong. I would love it if they score 45, but it's not worth it if the cost of trying to do that ends up being you score 20 and you put 14 on the board for the opponent, which is what regardless of who's at quarterback, happened way too much last year, where the offense was just giving the other team points and putting the defense in awful position. So we'll see how much of a trust there is and how much of just an understanding of just how good this defense is, and being able to sort of, be patient, let the game come to you a little bit, especially as Deshaun Watson has said, he's a notoriously slow starter. Great. All the more reason for you not to force things, take the profit, and just let it play out and see more plays. You're going to get a better feel for it than constantly going 3 and out, trying to take bigger chunks and then just getting on the iPad.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, Dorsey and some of the stuff that they're going to do with, that they've been doing kind of with the short motion and the motion at the snap, and to your point, will create some easy opportunities, especially early in the game, and their scripted plays especially. So you would think that would be a big part of their game plan, is to get him going with some easy stuff early.
Yeah, I would be shocked if if in the first couple of plays they don't have something where he's just almost immediately turning and throwing the ball, just to get him going in that mindset, have him get in that zone of, I got to get the ball out.
Or just a completion, right? Just mentally complete it. And yeah, absolutely. All right. So we're going to go to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, who watches the same clip as us, just a portion of it, with Quincy Avery, new member of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, Dustin Fox, in attendance. And they are talking expectations for Deshaun Watson. What else would anybody be talking about right now, Pete? So here we go.
And we have a new sponsor we're going to unveil in a few minutes. But first, as always, kickoff. Finally.
We're actually just one day away, right?
Friday
and
NFL
Saturday.
kickoff,
Yeah, from the season.
NFL kickoff,
From the NFL season.
Specifically for the Browns. We are so close to finally seeing Deshaun Watson play real meaningful football since last November. And on the Maggie and Perloff show yesterday, Deshaun Watson's quarterback, Deshaun Watson's quarterback coach, Quincy Avery, was on and talked about Deshaun's rehab. And as Steve's pulling it up, Steve knew this was here, Steve. Slacking on me.
Steve, you got one job,
man. Play the stop from Quincy Avery whenever you get a chance. Here's Quincy Avery talking about Deshaun Watson's offseason as he gets ready to take on the Cowboys in Week 1.
All right.
I think that this has been his best. Hey, is it as good, right? He throws a...
And I don't know that I...
Today's matchup against the Cowboys?
Of course. Anybody that's been paying attention has concerns because we don't know what we have. And I don't know that I would have said that. Why are you heaping more pressure on a guy that's...
Great point.
Just really succumbed to the pressure, if you think about it. Well, we talked about how difficult it was going to be for Deshaun Watson to overcome the off-the-field stuff. And we watched a guy who was a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback come to Cleveland and really kind of succumb to that pressure. And so I was hoping that this offseason, really I was hoping since back to the surgery, that the entire stretch from then to today would be pulling the relief valve on the pressure cooker that has been around Deshaun Watson. And we kind of have. He's been under the radar, not a lot of national chatter about him at all, which I think is good. But to have your guy come out and say, best offseason in a very long time, throwing the ball harder, that heaps expectations upon what we already had. So, yes, I have concerns, and we can circle back around, but I'm curious to see what that comment did to your guys' thoughts on what we're going to expect from Deshaun Watson.
I'm sorry, but that's insane. I don't know. To think that the pressure has somehow reduced, I'm not sure, in this offseason. And people are talking about him all the time nationally. That's all they talk about when they talk about the Browns is him and his performance. And then to say that this is somehow adding pressure to him, I just don't get that, Pete. I'm sorry.
Right. I mean, the $230 million contract didn't disappear. The draft picks they gave up have not disappeared. everybody who talks about the Browns says, I really like the Browns this season. They have a really talented roster, and Deshaun Watson is the but. So I don't think Quincy Avery talking up his guy has any impact on anything in terms of that. Like, if he's wrong, Quincy Avery's still getting paid very handsomely to do this, and Deshaun Watson's still getting $230 million. Now, the other part about this is like nothing. Let's just talk about Quincy Avery for a moment. He's not afraid. He's just not. And I don't think Deshaun Watson, in terms of pressure, is worried, is backing down from it. My entire concern, and has been a conversation with Quincy Avery, has been trying to do too much. And Quincy Avery talking to him in terms of manage the game better. Let the game come to you a little bit. Just make smart decisions. Give yourself opportunities to, find those bigger plays as the game comes along, as opposed to trying to go make them happen. And like it, a lot of times, and by virtue of him having his own podcast and doing all these things, like you've heard Deshaun Watson say the same thing. So
yes,
one, I desperately hope he's firmly embracing that mindset. But like nothing anyone says is going to change anything, because if he goes out and he plays great, the next week it's going to be, well, I want to see him do it again. And if he plays badly, it's going to be, oh man, here we go. The Browns need to start looking at quarterbacks, this, that, and the other. How long till Jameis is playing? So there's no
avoiding the pressure.
There's no avoiding it. There's no sense in trying to sort of duck the situation.
Yeah.
If Deshaun Watson's had a great offseason, so be it. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying that. Obviously, I'll tell you, it's a hell of a lot better than the first offseason. He's not in court. He's not dealing with all the nonsense. He's not doing those extraordinarily uncomfortable press conferences. Just virtue of that, he's having a better offseason. Like, who are we kidding? So hopefully the rest of this is accurate, that he is having a great offseason. And if he is, who cares if Quincy Avery says it? He needs to be having a great offseason, because he needs to have a much better regular season, because that's all anyone cares about. So, like, this is semantics. It's semantics about what pressure and this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. They need him to win football games, period.
Yeah. I would push back on the whole succumb to pressure thing too. Like, I don't know if that's, to your point, like him making the $230 million throw is accurate, or trying to do too much, but succumbing to pressure, I don't know if that's necessarily like what is exactly the best way to describe what has happened to him. Because we saw him to start to get it last year before he got hurt twice.
He is entirely focused on trying to be, has been to this point, trying to be the franchise quarterback, trying to be the hero. Because as I've said all along, ever since he got here, he has seen being a great quarterback, leading the Browns to the Super Bowl and all this stuff as a path to redemption, a path to get his, reputation back in as much as that is possible. So it is the opposite of what he's talking about succumbing. No, he is doing too much. And that is ultimately what's gotten in trouble. Holding on to the ball too long, taking stupid hits that are entirely avoidable, throwing passes that he has trying to make hero throws that are never gonna be there, instead of just taking the profit. And like, we heap praise on him, and I will continue to say the best throw he made all year was in the Ravens game on that comeback to Amari Cooper. But like, people are criticizing him for like a lot of these easy throws. Great. That's all I want him to do. Take the easy stuff and let your playmakers do it, which is a large part of what that Ravens game was. And like, that is the game management that Quincy Avery is talking about. Making the smart plays, letting your dudes take over, and it's going to reflect great on you. Like, and Quincy Avery is a big Tom Brady guy. And a lot of Tom Brady over the years, yes, he's made any number of phenomenal game-winning, game-breaking throws. But a lot of what Tom Brady did well was just getting the ball out and taking the profit and letting his guys do the work. Yes, thank you. Yeah, there you go. Tom Brady, the easy throw guy. Like, that's not a knock on him. That is a credit. Like, take the easy stuff and let it work for you. I mean, so much of this game is not doing stupid stuff and making stupid mistakes. Tom Brady made a career, arguably the greatest of all time, by just being very smart, understanding where his guys were going to be, taking the easy stuff and punishing the defense for it.
I would even say that in the Super Bowl, in the final drive of the game where Mahomes goes legend status to drive down the field and win the game again this last year, the throws on that drive were just taking what the underneath stuff and what was there as they played over the top, and he just worked the ball down the field and scored a touchdown. It was a perfect drive because he threw it to the right person every time, but it was literally just that. It was not him squeezing the ball between three people. It was him just making the right decision to the guys underneath.
And ultimately, that's where I think people are foolish by writing quarterbacks off too fast. Whether it's Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, or potentially Deshaun Watson. Like, Deshaun Watson doesn't need to have a miraculous divine intervention to be good again. He just needs to do the stuff that we saw him do against the Ravens and doing those type of things. And then he can mix in the occasional great play where he's doing the $230 million play. But so much of being a good quarterback at the highest level is just taking the easy stuff.
Yep.
I mean, I thought the exact same thing you just said, is that we already put a lot of expectations on him, a lot of pressure on him as fans,
with the contract,
as media, with the contract. For sure, you make that much money, people expect you to play excellent football, to be like a top 5 type of quarterback, and he hasn't been. Right. I mean, he's had a couple of good quarters where he's made some plays, but not nearly enough. To this point, it's been an absolute disaster. Anybody who says otherwise is fooling themselves. But this year, I feel like we've lowered the expectations, probably rightfully so, to a point where
up until this,
correct. And now all of a sudden we feel like, oh, his quarterback coach says he's 1,000% healthy. He's throwing the ball harder than prior to the injury. It's like, okay, well, now we expect the Super Bowl.
I do.
Why not? When you signed the guy for $245 million,
what happened? Well, I don't know how he got here. Don't get me wrong. I understand where he's going with this. Look, if Deshaun Watson is a Pro Bowl or a top 15 quarterback, the Browns are a contender. Let's say top 12 quarterback, the Browns are a contender. So I understand where he's going. But right this second, all I'm worried about is that he plays well Sunday.
Right.
And that's and I get it. But I think that's overstating just how positive Quincy Avery was. All he said was he's throwing the ball with more velocity, and that may just be simple fact. I don't know. If he says it and I'm presuming that Quincy Avery has measured this. I think he said he measured it.
Yeah.
And then he's had a great offseason. Great. But that doesn't automatically get us to a point where we're talking about Super Bowl. But hey, if you're a Browns fan, your whole thing is sitting here going, man, I hope Deshaun Watson can get back to, if not 2020, a close semblance of that. And if he's not, you're already down here anyway in terms of your happiness with the situation, your expectations. So Quincy Avery is giving you a little bit more hope that he's better than he was. And if he is, then we are going to be talking about Super Bowl, to his point. But I'm not. I think we're getting a little too far ahead of ourselves right this second.
No doubt. And Jay, just with the I do.
What? Look. I desperately hope for the Browns that is what that is what people are talking about coming out of this game against Dallas. They put up 35 points and the defense is great and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there going, man, what can this team achieve? First division title since 1989. All these things that Browns fans have been sort of quietly hoping would happen. But one, I don't know how many people have seen that interview, for one thing.
Right.
And two, I think in some way, in the same way that here, I'll give you another comparison. I think Dustin Fox is right when he says to this point, Deshaun Watson has been a disaster. As I've made fun of any number of times, he got paid what's the figure I threw out there? $90-some million for one great half of football.
Yeah.
Quincy Avery isn't, it said in that interview, he's played pretty well. Well, nobody's going to believe that. So, I think by virtue of him saying that, they take everything else he's saying with a little bit, not a grain, a pinch, a full shaker, a goddamn mine of salt, and saying, yeah, he's this guy. He's going to talk, he's going to pump him up. So I think you have to marry that into whatever you're hearing from him. Now, if you heard that if Kevin Stefanski came out and said that, if Kevin Stefanski said he has had the best offseason, he's thrown with way more velocity
ever,
then at that point, I'm with them. I'm with them 100%. Now you are talking Super Bowl. Now you're saying it's there, but and it's not disrespect to Quincy Avery. It's just he's his guy.
It shouldn't change your it shouldn't change your expectations from we were having a quiet offseason to I do Super Bowl. I expect it now. You know what I mean? Come on.
And that's again, it's nothing against Quincy Avery, and if he's right, great. But that's the only person saying this right now. Fine, and maybe the Browns are quietly thinking this. I mean, here's the one thing. I went on this whole rant about the team feeling disconnected. This is another part I would point to in terms of that. Whatever the fans think about all the issues with this team, the team is quietly very confident. And maybe they're wrong for feeling that way. I mean, we've seen that in the past, but between the stuff of being very determined based on what happened in the playoff game from the defense and just the confidence you're hearing from all these guys on the offensive side of the ball, and they're not boasting. They're just quietly feeling good about where they're at, which I think is in opposition from where fans are at for the most part. And again, I think this is where you get some of that disconnect. What if they're right? What if they feel good about for all the right reasons? You're not dealing with with CeeDee Lamb's contract, for example, or Jamar Chase's contract situation, or what the 49ers were dealing with. They had all their guys in. Now some of these guys were hurt and waiting for these other things, but they're there, and these Browns players still feel very positive about the situation. I'm hoping, I guess I'm desperately hoping that they are not out of step with where they feel like they are, but they've got a lot of veterans who've been through this, understand where this team has been. Joel Bitonio and some of these other guys who've been on some of these teams that had all these high expectations and then completely tanked. I'm very curious to see how that sort of plays out when we finally get them on the field Sunday.
Agreed. And Larry says in the chat, they seem more mature. And I would even say, I don't know about that, but I would say across the board, when you hear the Browns, to your point, they seem comfortable with where they're at, and they seem loose. Right.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And if they get waxed on Sunday, everybody's going to sit there and go, well, of course they were stupid and unprepared and this, that, and the other. But I maybe too much. I put so much on what this team went through last year, going through what they did, and every week somebody else was down, and every week was another problem they had to solve. And here again, I'm predicting this team to go 10-7. It's not like I'm going, well, the Browns are going to go, crush the division and this, that, and the other. But I do think this team is a little bit more battle hardened. They've got so many of these guys coming back. They're a little bit more battle hardened, hopefully healthier. They've seen a lot of stuff this past year in terms of reinforcing the whole next man up and the guy playing for the guy next to you and all these things. And hopefully they, we talk about culture and that's something you have to reinvest in every year because the team is different every year.
Yes.
But I feel like some of that quiet confidence is because they've seen how they've been able to endure and overcome some situations where how many games last year did fans completely write them out of that they came back and won? And I do think that you get, they got real pelts on the wall from that. They beat the Ravens on the road. They beat the 49ers. They beat some really good teams in definitely subpar conditions, and I think they feel good about where they're at without being like, we're going to win the Super Bowl or we're going to dominate this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
I like. We'll see. I could be absolutely dead wrong on this, but I feel like this team has a better sense of who they are, and I'm putting a lot on the experience they went through last year.
Agreed. I feel like, yeah, I have the same read, and we may be wrong, but yeah, I think that's the read for sure.
Him to win a Super Bowl, and so to this point hasn't done any of that. But if he's better than when we signed him, or when we saw when he was healthy, okay, why not have those expectations?
Well, I know that we've kind of dubbed this season the no excuses tour.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm with you on that. There are no excuses. I think the one thing that would give pause to some fans who are ready to say this guy's done, he'll never be what we thought, is the fact that that injury was still lingering. But to me, and not that was going to be an excuse, because, Bull, I'm with you.
Yeah.
No excuses tour. If 2 weeks in he has to sit for a sore shoulder, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. But now, based on the fact that his own guy is saying he's throwing the ball harder, the injury is absolutely a non-factor, the shadow of a possible excuse has just been set on fire, and you can take that off the table. I don't want to hear about an injury. I don't want to hear about a sore shoulder. That's gone.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to find out everything we need to know this year about Deshaun Watson because, yeah, I mean, I understand he's going to still make money next year or so. Even if he has a bad year, he's probably still going to be the starting quarterback next year. But
it would have to be a disaster for him not to be.
Right. But when the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson, I think most of us were super excited. Maybe you not quite as much, and there was a segment of the fan base between the off-the-field stuff and because of a fondness for Baker Mayfield, there was a percentage of the fan base that wasn't as excited.
Right.
But I know that myself, and I believe the majority of the fan base initially was super pumped.
Would you say
about
this,
this
Bull?
move.
I would say that with maybe the exception of OBJ,
yeah,
this was the most celebrated acquisition in the history of the Cleveland Browns. Probably Bernie Kosar going into the supplemental draft was probably bigger.
No doubt. Certainly in the modern history.
In the modern era.
OBJ was the most celebrated move in team history? Wait, what? Come on, man.
I know. Listen to it.
Don't get me
Wait.
wrong,
OBJ.
It was a big deal, but no, come on now.
Yeah.
Andre Rison was more celebrated than
Right.
OBJ
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Here comes
Another
the
decoy.
Yeah. Here comes the OBJ. This is funny.
It was big.
That
People
was big.
were running around in the streets after OBJ.
Yeah, especially because we thought even I and people who were down on Baker were a little higher on him then than we were now. But
I mean, listen, we were excited for Johnny Manziel too, but it was different with those guys because they never played in the league.
They had no track
Deshaun
record.
Watson was proven.
Yes.
Everything we saw for Deshaun Watson before Cleveland was great. I understand the record his last year there was bad, but everybody was like, okay, well, it wasn't his fault. They were bad. The team sucked around him, and look at these numbers he put up.
Right.
And the 2 years before that, he went to the playoffs. He got up on Patrick Mahomes that 1 year in the postseason. And great. Deshaun, I just find it impossible to believe that all of that talent has gone away. It's got to still be there. And I feel like this is the last chance for him to find it. Because if he goes 4 years without a good season, I can no longer have any faith that it's coming back. This is the last chance. I got to believe it's still there. And, I've been kind of lukewarm on Deshaun Watson all offseason. But if his coach is saying he's healthy, and I remember that feeling I had when the Browns traded from the excitement I had that the Browns had finally found a franchise quarterback. Yeah. And I'm actually a little more optimistic about Deshaun Watson than I've been for most of the season. I'm still not going to say I'm 100% convinced. How could you be? He hasn't played well enough. He's coming off an injury. He's barely played. But the talent, he's still young enough. The talent is there. He's got to get it done. And, yeah, there are zero excuses. He's got the talent around him. He's got everything he needs to have success.
All right, G-Bush, you're up.
Man, this is exactly what he was supposed to be saying. That's what I'm talking about, Quincy. You got your man out here. That's exactly what you're supposed to be saying. Stand on that. Give me that 110%. Like, Look, we talk about he want him to have confidence. I want my quarterback having confidence. I want him to be like, you know what? Yeah, they ain't seen me. I want you to sleep on it. I want you to see what I'm doing over here. But the thing is, Quincy didn't see him practice. He didn't see him play. He's with him every single day. And one of the things that we talked about so many times is getting the quarterback to be back confident to who he is. And part of being confident in who you are is vocalizing that. That's why Jameis Winston is here for a certain.
Can you speak performance into existence, though?
Yeah. That has to be in you.
Damn, I've tried that. It doesn't work.
But you got
it doesn't for me.
But you got to be. Well, I mean, no disrespect. Deshaun Watson's a world class athlete. I mean, he's done it.
Was he speaking that into his? Remember, his talk before last season was very confident.
You know, like we talk about it. We can go back and we can relitigate and rehash. We can go back and say, yeah, he's played 11 games, whole games. He sat out a year. People say that's his problem. He came back. He couldn't be in because he got suspended. Couldn't be in the offseason. Couldn't practice. He came off the street and threw footballs when he was there, not last year, but the year before. He played 6 games this year. That's all been litigated. Here's the point. We here right now. It's game time. It's game week. And for Deshaun Watson, he wouldn't have made that statement if he didn't think Deshaun Watson was 1,000% ready to go. Kevin Stefanski would have not played him if Kevin Stefanski didn't think he was 1,000% ready to go. And they keep restructuring this deal. So the front office got the backing of Deshaun Watson. So everybody is backing it, right? For us, I'm not going to tell the fans to believe in something they ain't seen yet. That's part of the game. Like, yeah, you got to go out and prove it. It don't matter what Quincy say. He's still got to come out and throw the football. But
you think it added pressure to him? Unnecessary pressure?
No, he better like the pressure. He better embrace it.
Hasn't so far.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, at this point, the pressure's gotten in his head, it appears.
I don't know one quarterback. If you think that he's going to be a top-notch quarterback or a Pro Bowler or a quarterback that gets it done to hold that trophy, you got to be able to deal with the pressure. So I'm not trying to take none off of him. If you're going to be Manning or Brady or Roethlisberger or one of the greats or even win with Patrick Mahomes, you can't be half-stepping with Patrick Mahomes in your division and Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. Man, you better come out here and
so let's do this. Based on what we've heard, we haven't seen him. Let's give what I expect Deshaun Watson to do on Sunday at Huntington Bank Field. That's going to take some time. Who cares? And somebody, I don't know if all you guys got it. I saw somebody sent a suggestion that we need a nickname, the hunting ground, because our defense hunts opponents.
Yeah,
I mean, let's just let that.
We can call it whatever we want. They're not paying us.
No, yeah. So
I called it Cleveland Brown Stadium when it was First Energy Stadium.
That's right.
That's exactly right. So here's what we have to figure out.
Yeah.
What's he going to do on Sunday? What are your expectations? And here's my expectation.
Yeah.
Based on the Browns were so confident they didn't need to put him out there in the preseason. He doesn't need to play. He's fine. He's 100% ready to go on all 8 cylinders on the first snap.
I don't think that. I think it was caution.
If you weren't sure, you better get his ass out there and let's see. Let's see it.
I think they was cautious about the shoulder.
What'd you say?
I said one thing does not have anything necessarily to do with the other.
It really doesn't.
We love this idea that preseason is going to get guys ready to go. Kenny Pickett, 158.3 quarterback rating in the preseason last year. He sucked, and he the number 3 quarterback on the Philadelphia Eagles this year. Like there are guys who like preseason and think it's beneficial, and that's fine. I think Deshaun Watson wanted to play, but the Browns were absolutely smart to be cautious. Yes. And he played in joint practices, which you've heard multiple people say is just as good. And ultimately, that's all I'm worried about. I don't need him to get hit. That's a stupid way to think about this, is to say, let's get our quarterback who's going to be hopefully the quarterback all 17 games this year in the regular season plus postseason. Let's see it. Let's, again, get the surgical 2x4 and just whack him. Like, forget this other stuff. It makes no sense. So if a lot of this comes down to how you practice, and that's ultimately on the Browns. And yes, they clearly wanted to be able to put him out there against the Seahawks for however long.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if that is making or breaking you, you've got a problem. Like then he wasn't going to be ready. Like that's not going to be the difference. Maybe it hurts you initially in this game somehow, but ultimately I don't think it's going to make a difference. Seeing him going out against vanilla defenses and this, that, and the other. The other thing I would point out, I agree with everything G. Bush said, except for the restructure part. Completely immaterial. Had nothing to do with their confidence in Deshaun Watson. They were going to do that regardless. They could have no faith in Deshaun Watson, and they're still going to do that restructure because it's going to set them up to pay for next year's roster, roll that money over so they can keep this thing going. Because ultimately, whether Deshaun Watson is here or not, they need to keep rolling over that money to continue to pay for this thing. If they didn't, if they said, we're going to go ahead and eat this cap hit now, you would be saying goodbye to guys next year. They can't do that. It is part of the plan. That's why they went to a leading amount of salary cap room with this move. And they're going to roll it all over. And it's like $60 million. So that's $60 million already invested in next year's cap, plus the $60 million you're going to have with that you already had. And some of that's probably going to go to this cap, but that's also going to help them continue to maneuver and add guys and keep adding players. But if Deshaun Watson stinks out the joint, they're going to have to start looking at quarterback options. But that had nothing to do with the restructure decision. That just, they have to do that to do business with it. And Brad, obviously Jack Duffin's been all over this, but even Brad Spielberger, who I don't remember what agency he works for now, but he was all over this and being like, this is what the Eagles do all the time. He's right. Money in the future is worth less than money now, or like in terms of cap space. It's going
to be a lesser percentage. Yeah.
Right. So that part is completely irrelevant. But the rest of this, I agree with them. Like,
I agree too.
Yeah. The important thing is Deshaun Watson's not the one sort of like broadcasting it, but I hope this is the mindset he has. And here again, with Quincy Avery talking about, I think Based Bull and Quincy and G. Bush are right. The biggest thing he said that is of importance is that he's healthy. He's healthy. We're not talking about the shoulder. And I think that's more than anything else what he was really trying to do, because that's the question he was asked. Or is he ever going to be the same? Is his shoulder healthy? This, that, and the other. And Quincy's saying, yes, his shoulder is not only healthy, but it's stronger. Still got to see it on the other part. But in terms of, anyone who wants to talk about rust or the shoulder or whatever, all that stuff is off the table. He's still got to prove it. He's still got to be great. But that's why I don't get caught up in the whole expectations thing. All that means is Deshaun Watson is 100% ready to go and do whatever Deshaun Watson's going to do.
Yeah, I just don't understand this attitude from Jay, where it's like, oh, you can't say, he didn't take any preseason snaps, so he better be damn good. Snap one, or Quincy Avery, talks good about him, so he better be. We better go to the Super Bowl. Like, none of those expectations already existed and already there, and only take place in real things on the field when he actually makes throws and he has to perform. Not in Jay's mind or whatever he's forming there. He's just going crazy. I don't understand it, but whatever. I guess getting so mad about that stuff and saying, well, he better be, on every cylinder if he didn't take one preseason snap, and now we better go to Super Bowl now that Quincy said this. It's just crazy.
The obsession with preseason is bizarre. I've talked about all the reasons it doesn't really matter. Again, ultimately, no one's going to care. If Deshaun Watson comes out and goes 6 of 7 on the first drive and the Browns score a touchdown, you know what you're not going to hear about? Preseason.
Exactly.
No one will care. And this happens all the time. Like the Rams have rookies that are going to start for their team this year. They didn't play in the preseason, even rookies. So there's no one way to do this thing. But ultimately, again, they took what I thought was the prudent path and being cautious and not putting him in harm's way in a situation where I think their offense was going to be sort of, if impacted with how they could run it and get these things ready. And we saw Jameis Winston take multiple hits. I don't want to see Deshaun Watson taking. So, I think it proved out to be the smart decision.
Yeah, that was the best thing you said that day, or when you were watching the game. It was like the third play, he took 3 people, went low on him, and he got flagged. And you're like, I'm certainly glad that wasn't Deshaun. And you were 100% right. All right, folks, that is 2 hours of the React right up to the minute. We appreciate you watching as always. It's game week. You've got to keep it locked at the OBR, 24/7 coverage of everything going on. Browns will be getting you ready right up to pregame through the game, post game. Keep it locked here for everything. We'll be on tomorrow night with All Eyes on Cleveland before the actual NFL season starts. Talk more Browns, Cowboys, and then things I think I know on Friday. So make sure you are hitting like and subscribe, telling a friend to get over to the OBR. We appreciate your attendance tonight. Any parting words, Pete, before we get out of here?
Yeah, just check out what's going on in the OBR in terms of the written stuff. Sam Penix is done what will be 3 total film rooms looking at the offense. Cedric Tillman in his growth, and there's going to be one more tomorrow on another receiver, which is all really good stuff. He gets into a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff, and we talk about executives trying to fit guys into boxes. You can sort of see him lay out what the Browns are really trying to do with their quarterbacks, through some of the stuff they've shown in preseason, and DTR did a really nice job with it, which I think is really informative and gives you stuff to sort of look for as the Browns get underway.
We'll also have the entire OBR staff record predictions out for you tomorrow. So go ahead and take a look at that analysis and picks as well as among other articles that will be out there for you to read. Appreciate you all. For Pete Smith, follow him on X @_Pete Smith _ Fantastic job as always. My name is Brad Ward. Keep it locked at the OBR. We're going to get out of here. Thank you and good night.